So I want to echo those sentiments. Like, what a great morning. We have 12 people who have been baptized, 8 more to go in our next service. Super exciting. I don't know about you guys, but during that song, I just had like tears in my eyes as I've watched these lives making the decision to say, I'm in Jesus, I want to do this for life. It's incredible. Proud of some of our younger kids, proud of our older people who are doing an awesome day here at Hope City. And I want to say this as well. Many of you are aware that last weekend we went through our Easter musical production and we did 5 performances and we had over 300 people, 300 volunteers from our own church. So if you were part of that, can I say thank you? Thank you for leaning in. Yeah. Thank you for just giving of your life for like 2 weeks and plus. And here's the impact we had. We had 1,000 more people than last year. So this year we had just over 8,000 people attend those performances. Wait, that's cool, but check this out. We had 89 people text life. That means 89 people made a decision to say, I want to take the next step of knowing Jesus. Now that is something to get excited about. That is something worth doing. Now I was 20 years old and I had this moment where God spoke to me. Now, it wasn't some weird kind of like, oh, how do you relate to that? And he heard a voice. No, nothing like that. Let me explain to you what happened. I was in my second year of my degree in marketing and loving it, thinking that one day my dream was to go to work at Burton, a company that's well known for snowboards, if you know that name. And I really wanted to work for them in their marketing department. And I was going to church, everything was great, I was loving Jesus, but this was the trajectory that I had picked for my life. And I remember one cold Sunday night in February going to church. Now that was back in the day when we used to have Sunday night service. Maybe you know about that. If you grew up in church years past, we used to go to church Sunday night and somebody was like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Well, we did it twice on Sunday. It was legit, right? And so we went and I made plans with my friends afterwards to go for wings like I used to do most Sundays. And I get into church and there was a guest speaker there that Sunday. And he spoke, and to tell you honestly, I can't remember a thing that he spoke about, which makes me feel awesome because I speak for a living. And most of you probably don't remember much of what I speak about. That's okay, as long as God changes you, that's a win for me, okay? But he spoke, I couldn't remember what he spoke on, but he said, if anyone wants to pray, let's make this church open for prayer. And I remember I was sitting near the back, and I went down to the front pew in the church, and I sat in the left corner on the front side. And as I'm praying, I'm having this conversation with God that went something like this. God, I'm sensing that you're calling me to be a pastor. I don't want to do that. I like where I'm at. I like my life. I like this trajectory. And if that is legit and true, you have to speak to me. You have to make it known. So I don't care if you call that putting a fleece out prayer, whatever. It was my way of saying to God, I need to know this. 10 minutes later, the speaker who was there did not know me at all. And by the way, no one knew that this conversation was going on in my mind between me and God. Comes up to me, stops in front of that place where I was sitting, and he just taps me on the shoulder and says this, young man, stop running from God's call on your life. And I was like, oh my gosh, right? God, you just spoke to me. God, you just made this so clear. God showed up. It was my epiphany moment that changed my life. Here's what I think. I actually think all of us want God to speak to us. If we're skeptical that he exists, we ask the question, God, are you real? Are you out there? If we consider ourselves Christians, we ask God time and time again, show me your way. Show me what path to take. And if we're really honest, sometimes he answers and sometimes he doesn't. And here's the weird part. We've all met those people who say, yeah, I woke up this morning and the Lord told me to have some Cheerios and chocolate milk. And then he told me to have this outfit ready for the day. And I'm like, really, man? God speaks to you like that? Like, I don't get that. Have you ever had an epiphany moment? Now, it could have been you were in college and one day she was your friend And the next day you're like, this is wife material, if you know what I'm talking about, right? Or it could have been during an exam in math where you can't figure out the answer. You're racking your brain, and all of a sudden it clicks and you're like, I know what I got to do. Or it could have been even in parenting where you've been trying one thing over and over with your child. It's not working. And all of a sudden you try something else and it connects and it works. Gizmodo.com calls it the aha moment. And I think most of us, we want a revelation where through the experience, we grasp something we never saw before. Because moments like that, they just make us feel human, right? They bring insight, they bring clarity, they bring guidance. And for many of us, they change our lives. They change us in the macro decisions moving forward. And so we all want those moments. We all need those moments, especially when it comes to our faith in Jesus. And if you've experienced this, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, let me ask you, could you be missing something in Jesus you never saw before? Like, what if I told you there's a way to position yourself to make it more of a probability? Now, I'm concluding our series entitled Villains today, where we've been looking at some of the notorious individuals around the crucifixion and the death of Jesus and how they are really just like us. Like inside each of us, there is a little bit of a villain. And the guy I want to look at had one of the most direct involvements in the physical crucifixion of Jesus. He's not given a name, he's just given a title, a fairly important one, and he is known as the Centurion. Now, a centurion was a soldier, but not just an ordinary soldier. He was someone who had years of experience, and so he climbed up the ranks in his job. He got this great position, and his job was to oversee about 100 people in the army. So this guy was a leader who others listened to and followed. And I want to tell you a little bit of his story, essentially his own epiphany moment. Now, Jesus had just appeared before a guy named Pilate. Pilate was the Roman governor who oversaw the affairs of the Jewish people at the time of Christ. The high priests and the teachers of the law just convinced Pilate to release a known criminal to them other than Jesus. That criminal is known as Barabbas. And I want to say this, I talked about him a couple weeks ago. If you ever want to catch up on sermons that you miss around here, you can check us out on YouTube or our website. 2 weeks ago, I talked about Barabbas. Last week, Pastor Ken did a great job talking about Judas. It's all there. You can check it out. And today, we're talking about the Centurion. And so Pilate, he gives the command, he releases Barabbas, he gives the command to have Jesus beaten and crucified. And so I want to pick it up with a writer in the New Testament by the name of Mark. Now, just so you have some context, Mark, he was a sidekick of one of the disciples called Peter, and he was able to put together a book chronicling the life of Jesus through the words, stories, and insights that he gleaned from Peter. And I also want to say this about Mark, in case you don't know this. He traveled once with a guy named Paul. Paul wrote a lot of the New Testament. He did a lot of early missionary journeys for the Christian faith. He was traveling with Paul at one point, and whatever happened on their journey, there was something where Mark bailed, and that kind of ticked Paul off. It kind of bugged him a little bit. And it's interesting because whatever the circumstance was, we don't know, but it illustrates that even when we fail, God still uses us. Because think about this. In the moment of his low, I'm sure Mark never imagined that he would write a book that thousands of years later we would be reading. So whatever you're walking through today, listen to me, man, there is always hope. God is always orchestrating a next for you. And a lot of times it might just be bigger than you think or imagine. But I want us to go to the book of Mark. Mark chapter 15. I'm going to read a chunk of verses here for you. They're going to start at verse 22. And just so you understand what's going on, Jesus has just been beaten. He's been mocked. There's been a crown of thorns pushed on his head. He's been on his way to Golgotha. And along the way, he couldn't even carry his cross, so they got someone else to carry the cross for him. And then we pick it up here. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him, dividing up his clothes. They cast lots to see what each would get. So talk about humility. They stripped him in front of others and divided up his clothes. It was the third hour when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified two robbers with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Christ, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross that we may see and believe." Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. So basically what's happening is all the people around Jesus at this point in time are making fun of him. They're mocking him. They're throwing insults on him. It's just going on. And then we read this. "At the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, 'Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani,' which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." So it shows like these people were spiritual because Elijah was a prophet from the past. And they're all like, okay, we know about this guy, so maybe he's trying to summon some prophet from the past. One man ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn into two from top to bottom, and when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus heard his cry and saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." So the guy who made sure that Jesus was beaten, bruised, mocked, and crucified, the guy in charge of Jesus' death, the guy who gave approval to everything that was going on, was the guy who said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Like, what made him go there? Everyone living in Jerusalem and the surrounding places would have known about Jesus and the things he did, the things he claimed, the followers he had. And the centurion, he wasn't Jewish. He probably couldn't care less about Jewish religious traditions. And that man, during the final moments of Jesus' life, saw something he never saw before. He experienced something he never experienced before, and he heard something he never heard before. And this caused them all to say these words, "Surely this man was the Son of God." It was in the ordinary of doing his job that the extraordinary showed up. And that's just a great reminder to every single one of us that, you know what? You can't discount an ordinary day. Most times, it's in the ordinary where God shows up for us. Now, we're not given any clues as to what made this least likely candidate become one of the Christian converts, but we're given this verse. It's the last verse I read, verse 39. "And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus heard his cry and saw how he died, he said, 'Surely this man was the Son of God.'" So he heard and he saw something that in his entire career of doing crucifixions, he had never heard or seen before. And think about it. He would have carried out hundreds, maybe even thousands of crucifixions. That was part of his job. And at the beginning of the day, Jesus was just another criminal, just another deranged man deserving death. But something that day changed inside of the centurion. Something he heard, something he saw drove him to realize that statement that he had never realized before. So the question then is, what was it that he heard? I mean, he would have heard Jesus say these words, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing," as they're driving the spikes through his hands and through his feet. He would have heard, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And that's the sign of a lonely, scared man. And he would have heard this loud cry at the time of Jesus' death with the words, "It is finished." And having that much energy in a person on a cross before death was unusual. Typically, someone dying on a cross would have this slow ebbing of life, but Jesus died with a loud cry in full vigor. And that's what he heard, but it's also in what he didn't hear that day. He didn't hear what he normally would hear from guys that they were putting on the cross, which was cursing him out, cursing the soldiers out, yelling at them, calling down insults on them. He didn't hear any of that. He heard the exact opposite. And so it was evident that just by listening to Jesus, there was something different about this man. You see, the words Jesus spoke were and still are powerful. They're different. They're unlike anyone else's. They have the strength to change us. You want some proof? Here's some examples. Jesus said, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Those are Jesus' words. They're powerful. They cut to the heart in our lives. And so the centurion, he was changed by what he heard that day, but we also know that what he saw added to his epiphany moment. And what did he see? First off, in Jesus, he saw love for his accusers. I mean, think about it. Someone who did nothing wrong, someone who only helped others, someone wrongfully accused, someone dying, still had a heart for his accusers. That's messed up, but that's God. And let me tell you, no matter how far you may feel you are from him, no matter how bad you feel your life is, God loves you. He's there for you. That's his nature. That's his heart. But the centurion, he also saw something else that day. We read in the Bible that Jesus was crucified at 9 a.m. And then at noon, darkness came over the whole land for 3 hours. So imagine being the centurion standing on Skull Hill. It's the peak of the day, and suddenly it's dark out. Like, I mean, really dark out. Not like an eclipse moment, but for 3 hours, dead of night type of dark. Seeing something like that, you can't walk away and say, nah, it's just an ordinary day today. You know what I'm saying? He saw something he never saw before. And what everyone around him denied, what some religious people declared as blasphemy, what Jesus' own disciples couldn't even grasp at that moment, this ordinary centurion perceives in the unlikely context of Jesus' death. The least likely to believe, believes. And you know what that was? That was a foreshadow. Jesus came for all people, even for those that no one would think that Jesus came for. The centurion, I mean, he wasn't around all the miracles of Jesus. He wasn't in the temple when Jesus taught. He wasn't even part of that culture. But on that day, at that moment, he was in a particular place that changed his life forever. You know where he was? We read that he stood there in front of Jesus, meaning he was at the foot of the cross. There's something about being in the presence of Jesus. Jesus changes us. His presence inspires us. It welcomes us. It invites us. It exudes love. You know, some of the greatest promises in Scripture are about his presence. Listen, he says, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. Man, we want that, don't we? In your presence, there's fullness of joy. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them. Friends, Jesus is here today. His presence is here. He wants to connect with you. He wants to lift you up. He wants to encourage you. He wants to speak into your life. He wants you to know that he is here. Proximity caused the centurion to notice something. He was in a place where he could actually see and hear what he needed to see and hear. And there's something about proximity to the cross. Because you know what we can do? We can view the cross from a distance. Or we can see it around someone's neck. Or we can see it pulled out at funerals. Or we can know that, yeah, I know Jesus went to the cross. But until we approach the cross, until we find ourselves at the foot of the cross, we won't understand its significance in our lives. It's at the cross where we finally see. It's at the cross where Jesus took on the whole sins of the world. It's at the cross where we find life. It's at the cross where we see someone who gave his life in exchange for ours in order to offer us life. Paul writes this, "May I never boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ." Meaning the only time I want to brag, about something is about what the cross did for me. And so when we stand at the foot of the cross, we recognize this enormous sacrifice that Christ paid for us, for you, for me. We see our sin that drove him there. We see his love that is so overwhelming. We hear him say things like, "Father, forgive them." And everything in us recognizes, like the centurion, surely this man was the Son of God. Jesus was who he claimed to be. And the least likely to believe, believes. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're here and you've just lived through circumstances in your life and you're just saying, they're too hard to talk about, they're too enormous, and you know what? To know that God's there for me and believe that, man, I can't anymore. Or maybe you're here and you can't reconcile scientific reasoning and think science and Christian faith are at odds with each other. And so you say, there's no way that I can believe in God. Or maybe you've asked God for a sign, for something, for a signal, and you got nothing. And so obviously, if there's a God, man, he doesn't care about you. And yet, man, you're here today. You're watching from Terwilliger maybe, or you're watching online. And there's something inside of you that says, what if? What if Jesus is who he says he is? What if hope is found in the one who went to the cross? What if I could start again, have a clean slate, a do-over? What if he really is the Son of God who came to take away the sins of the world and offer me hope? What if? You see, Jesus invites the doubter. He invites the questions. And we see that in his interaction with one of his own disciples who couldn't actually grasp the fact that he was alive. And that disciple was the name of Thomas. Jesus invites all of us to seek him, and he promises that if we seek him, we will find him. So if you're here and you're the person who's least likely to believe, there are ways to position yourself to help you gain clarity. Listen to what Jesus said. That's one of them. And you can do that just by opening up Scripture and looking at the red words in the first 4 books of the New Testament. You can see what he did, and you can put yourself in places where you will learn more. Proximity mattered for the centurion, and it matters for you. So let me take you to the foot of the cross. Allow Jesus' words and actions to have impact on you. But maybe you're here and you already believe. You've made the decision to make Jesus Lord of your life, and you're trying to go after all that. Let me just say, way to go, awesome, super proud of you. But how many of you would say, okay, you've got someone in your life, someone close to you, who's the least likely to believe? And you're thinking, from my perspective, this person is never going to come to Christ. Now, you don't really say that out loud because you're a good Christian. You don't want to have lack of faith, but you actually think that from time to time. And it might be a friend. It might be a coworker. It might be your son. It might be your daughter. It might be your spouse. It might be your parents. It might be a neighbor. Who in your life is least likely to believe that you may have given up on? And I get it. We all have those relationships in our lives. I have a buddy who I grew up with. We've known each other since we were kids. And in our early 20s, his parents got killed in a car accident. And for the last decade and a half, he's been having major health issues. He doesn't serve God at all. In fact, he has said, I don't want anything to do with God. And I'm still there for him. I still make connections with him. He lives in the States. We talk to him, or I talk to him regularly, reach out for him. I pray for him because I'm not giving up on him. Who's the least likely to believe in your life? Friends, hear me out. Don't give up. Keep on praying. Keep on bringing that person to God. Keep on trying to have impact. What was it that drew this centurion? It was what he heard, what he saw, and proximity. And the way you live your life and the words you say have impact. They make a difference. Live like Jesus said we should live. What did he say? He said, you are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and what? Glorify your Father in heaven. And that only works with proximity. And sometimes it's you being there for them, just hanging out with them, spending time with them. And other times, it's a little bit more bold. It's like, Pastor Ken mentioned earlier. It's like just saying, hey, why don't you come to church with me? Why don't you join me? And again, I want to encourage you, next weekend is the perfect time in our Canadian culture to invite someone to church with you. And what's the worst that can happen? They say no. What's the best that can happen? They say yes. You see, seeing brings clarity, hearing brings understanding, proximity brings perspective. And maybe you're here this morning, you're saying, you know what, Phil, I am the least likely to believe. Hear me out. My prayer is that you may find yourself at this Easter season at the foot of the cross, hearing and seeing something in Jesus you never saw before. Perhaps having and working towards that epiphany moment in your life. Or maybe you're here and you've given up on someone thinking they're unreachable. Let me encourage you, don't give up. Keep on praying. Allow them to hear, see, and experience Jesus as a result of you spending time with them. It might be that light bulb moment needed for them, that epiphany experience where they say, man, God showed up. God spoke to me. You can't orchestrate it, friends. You can only be ready for it. So why don't you stand with me as I close in prayer here this morning, please. Jesus, I thank you that we have this example of the centurion in your word. A guy who seems so counter to everything you were about. A guy who seems so far away from the truth of Jesus. Yet in the moment at the foot of the cross, he encounters you and declares, you are the Son of God. I pray for all of us here, for those individuals in our lives that seem so far from you, or that seem like they will never maybe even enter the door of a church or have a conversation about you, Lord. I pray that you give us continued tenacity, strength, and wisdom to pray for them. May we not give up for our kids, for our parents, for our friends, for those that need you, God. Put those burdens strong on our hearts. Stir that in us. Give us that hope, that passion, that desire that says, God, we will keep on and we will not give up. We will pray for them. And so lift and encourage those individuals who find themselves in that spot here today. And maybe you're here and you're saying, man, I am the furthest, the least likely to believe, but today I've been encountered the foot of the cross, and I'm saying, I need Jesus. I want Jesus in my life. I want everything that he's about. I'm going to pray a prayer. It's just as simple as that. I'm going to ask you to pray a prayer in faith along with me, and you can start that journey as well. Let's pray. Jesus, as I'm here today, I see my need for you, and man, I've never thought I'd actually cross this threshold, but here I am saying, yes, you are the Son of God. Yes, you are the Savior of the world. And so I want to profess belief and faith in you. I ask you to come into my life. I ask you to help me pattern my life after your ways, moving forward from this day on. And so, Jesus, I surrender all that I am to you, and I thank you that you forgive me. I thank you for the power of the cross. I thank you that you set me free and you give me a new life. And so I ask for that today in your name. And so, God, I pray for every individual, for every couple, and for every family that's represented here this morning. I pray strength, wisdom, guidance, blessing. I pray hope, whatever circumstance they're walking in. I pray that they hang on to you as they go into this week. I pray that they look to you, God, and may you direct them through all things. Love you, Jesus. I pray this in your name. Amen. If you're here this morning and you prayed that prayer of committing your life to Christ or recommitting your life to Christ, can you text the word life to 555-888? We would just love to get a digital booklet in your hand and start to talk to you about the next steps of what it means to follow Jesus. Also, if you want prayer with one of our pastoral staff, they're going to be available down at the front right after this service. Friends, know this. Know that you are loved. Know that you are prayed for. And as you go into this week, remember that we serve a big God. And those that are least likely to believe can be drawn to him by a life that believes. So let God use you this week, okay? God bless you guys.